Okay, so here we are looking at the exercise processing data, which is the second exercise in jQuery, the JavaScript part of the class. I've copied and pasted this HTML into my IDE, and I've copied the questions as well, so we can see them above the code. The first thing to do then, so the first one is when I click on button set, read the text entered into the input and log it to the console. So here we have a button. If I enter something in here, the answer to what I want to happen is I click this button and it goes to the console, which is obviously this tab in the browser, right? So I get this by clicking on inspect element. Let me just demonstrate how to do that. And then I select console in this tab, and then I resize it so it's big enough here. And then here is where it's going to appear, the text. And if you remember that we can access that by using the console.log function in our code, whatever I put in here, let's put it in quotes so it realizes it's a string, will appear in the console. Okay? So, when I click on the button set, I want to read the text entered into input and log it to the console. So that's pretty straightforward. First thing is, so what I want to happen is when I click on the button set. So first of all, I need to select that button and add a click handler to it with what I want to happen inside the function. The button is this one, class is set button. Okay. So again, this is the CSS selector. I'm using a class, so it's got a dot in front of it. And I'm using the click handler with the function, with the anonymous function, which doesn't need any parameters. And be neat and tidy and put a colon at the end of my, semicolon at the end of my code. So, what I want to do is take the value of the input and send it to the console. So I could either do this in one line or I can do it in 2 lines. The one line version would be just to put the take the ID of the input, which is, okay, it's got a class, sorry, it's a class myInput. And okay, and to so when I click the button, what I'm going to do here is I'm logging to the console everything inside the brackets, and what's inside the brackets is I select the element, and then I get the value of that element. So hopefully, if I refresh the page, there you go, you see that I put in test to the box, and I press it, and it gets logged to the console. Okay, I could do this in 2 lines as well to make it slightly more legible, might be nicer. So I create a variable called text, which contains the value of the input, and then in the second line I log that variable to the console. Okay, that makes it slightly neater. Okay, but it's still exactly the same thing, strictly the same thing. Just one is a 1-liner, one is a 2-liner. Second was then when I click on the button set, put whatever the input text is into the div with the ID output. So this is almost the same, except instead of console.logging out text, I select the div with the ID output, and I say I want its contents. So this function, this jQuery function HTML, sets the contents of the div, or gets the contents of the div. If you don't pass anything, just doing this would get whatever the HTML content of the div is. But if I pass something in through here, it sets the HTML content of the div to whatever I give it. So if I give it text, there you go, it sets the HTML content of the div to the text. And if I change this and press it again, it'll set it again, and it overwrites the existing thing. Because as you saw in the previous exercise, we used append to add to the div. If I do that, you would see that it adds to the end of the div. Yeah, but here we don't want to do that. We want to set it, and so we want to overwrite it each time. So we use the HTML function here. Okay. So then the third exercise was to click on the Add button and add the content of the input field to the div. So that is keep the previous content and add the input text. That's exactly what I just showed you. You can do this with the append function. Sorry, but it shouldn't be on. It should be when I click on the add button, shouldn't it? Not the set button. So let me just check. Is that? No, it's not called add button. It's called my button because I haven't been very coherent in my class names. Okay, and we use append here. So I can either set it using this, or I can add it using this. But if I press set, it's going to go back to what it was because it's overwriting everything. Yeah. Okay. Everyone should understand how that's working. The other way of doing this would be to use the manipulating strings technique we saw in the previous exercise, where in the class, in one of the exercises in the class, and instead of using append, I can use HTML. But here, where I make, I can initialize my variable outside. No, let's do this a better way. Sorry. Let's do this a better way. When I click on the button and I create this variable text, I'm going to say the variable is equal to the content of the div already plus the new content from my input. Okay, and then I set it. I don't append it. So in that case, it does exactly the same thing. It's just I'm saying that the text, the variable, the value of text is equal to whatever is already in the output, yeah, using getting this with the HTML thing with nothing in it, and then whatever is in the input, and add those two things together, concatenate them together. Okay, it has the same effect. Next step then is when I click the button add, read the current value of the select and log it to the console. So here we get rid of this. And I want to select the value of the select, so that is, I think the select has a class as well, does it? No, it doesn't, it's just select. Okay, so we just select it using the HTML tag for the moment, and we take the value of that. Same function as we're doing the value of the input, and we'll log the whole thing to the console. So what is that? So the value is currently choose left or right, and then if I change to left, the value is left, and if I change to right, the value is right. Okay, I set that up because you can see I defined the value here on the options. So the option is left column or right column, and I said here that the value of this when I query it should be left, and the value of this when I query it should be right. So right now, that's the only one that doesn't have a value defined, so it takes the HTML. So I could, for example, just to make it really clear, set the value to 0 so that it's like, no, this has no value. Yeah, so nothing left, right. Okay, and then the final part is when I click the button add the current content of the input to the div left if the select is set to left, and to the div right if the select is set to right. So you can see I set these two divs up here, class left and class right, and I can do this really easily with an if. Okay, so I can get the value of the select. That's going to be either 0 or left or right. If the value of the select is left, then we select the left div, right, which I made, and did I say append or add? When I click the button add, read the current, and add the current content. So we're going to use append here because that's the easiest way to do that then. Okay, and we're going to append the value of the input. So I could, again, just to make this super explicit, okay, so I can make it, it's kind of overly word verbose here. I could have just used, like I did here, I could just take that and put it straight inside the brackets, but just to make it really clear. So if the value of the select is left, do that. Then we want to say, or else if the value of the select is right, then we select the right one. And then the final thing is, if the value is 0, then we want to do nothing, right? So we just want to leave that blank, because we don't want to do anything. If they haven't picked a left or right thing, we don't want to do nothing. So hopefully, add, that's gone into the left div, I guess. It has. The right column, add, it's gone into the right column. Keep adding to the right column. Now add to the left column. Now add to the right column. Add to no column. And if we wanted to properly do this, we could add in here, if the thing is, if the value doesn't make sense, then we need to tell the user, please select a column, left or right. Okay, because that means, and then that case, that then if I choose nothing, I'll get this alert telling me to pick a column. Voilà. There you go.